A turning point in my life, I was 10 years old. We just moved to Florida where we stayed just for a year. My parents hated it. We got a BB gun for Christmas. Took it out, and there was a sparrow, house sparrow up on the line. I just wanted to see if I could hit it, never dreaming that I would. And I killed it. And it died in my hand. It was just like Lady Macbeth. I can still see the blood. So I'm still trying to rectify that. That stuck with me. Bird watching's a nice hobby. I did a lot of that as a kid. Do you know who Roger Tory Peterson is?
Oh, yeah. I have a book of his.
Oh, yeah. Field Guide to the Eastern Birds. He came and did a Audubon screen tour when I was about 10. I just got my new Peterson book, which I'd spent about 6 months saving my allowance for it. And I went to hear Mr. Peterson speak. And he had my book, and he grabbed it before I could say anything and just wrote all over it. I was pissed. I said, you do not write in new books. So I have that autograph now. It's probably worth some money. I told him that story years ago. He came to the Nature Conservancy in Berkeley, the bookstore. And I told him he owed me a book. He laughed. I see a persimmon. Will that do instead of a bird? This is one of my favorite books on rodeo, easy enough to remember. It has some wonderful photographs by the late Louis Serpa, who is a famous rodeo photographer who died just a couple of years ago, I think. But more tellingly, it has notes by Larry McMurtry, who wrote the TV series, or the book that came from Lonesome Dove, which is the cowboy's favorite. And ironically, Mr. McMurtry is a big critic of rodeo, and he has commentary throughout this picture book, putting the cowboys in their place. One quote I'd like to read from it. It's really powerful, I thought. Mr. McMurtry writes, "Cowboys, sensing like gorillas that their time has passed, cling ever more desperately to anachronistic styles, not willing to admit that the myth has degenerated, the traditions eroded to a point where attempting to sustain them falls somewhere between silliness and the outright ridiculous." Well, I don't think most of the cowboys would take kindly to that, but I think he's right on the money. Rodeo has had its day, and I think now belongs in the dustbin of history. And just see the contortions in this book that the animals go through, just for fun and games. Going over backwards. Cowboy here, about to get stomped on by a 1,500-pound horse. They go in there with good intentions, and the cowboys love what they do. I don't think the same can be said for the animals. And of course, they start them young, like a kid riding a terrified calf. I consider that a form of child abuse as well as animal entertainment. Hopefully someday we'll make some of those connections. But I strongly recommend this as a good starting point for people intrigued with rodeo, pro or con. It's a good one.
Yeah, good girl. Good girl. You good girl, huh? I think the first time I met Eric was at a protest in Salinas. And he gathered people. There must have been about 15 or 20 of us there at the Salinas Rodeo. And from the moment I met him, I knew that this was a person that was a force to be reckoned with.
I think he's sort of like an unsung hero in the animal rights movement as far as I'm concerned. I don't say that based on any specific accomplishments. I would say that based on a consistent commitment and somewhere along the line, knowing that he wanted to devote his entire life to animal rights or animal welfare.
Feels like I've known Eric Mills forever. When I moved to the Bay Area in 1977 and started showing up at demonstrations and events, Eric was always there. He was one of the regulars. We had a small group of people in the San Francisco Bay Area who were always there at every demonstration. And this was the height of the demonstration era for the animal rights movement. We were at UC Berkeley, we were at Letterman Army Medical Center, we were standing online holding our signs and talking to each other, and that's my earliest memory of Eric, was just standing on a demo line and talking to him about whatever and being charmed by his Kentucky accent.
He's among the top 15 in the world right now. He's a neighbor out of Nevada. Whoa! Wow! Hang on. Ow.
My mind told me I should proceed with caution. My heart said, go ahead, make a bit on that.
I think many people come to rodeos just because it's a community event. It's the color, it's the costume, it's waving the flag, it's John Wayne, but it's all bogus. Rodeo is a lie. It has nothing to do with ranch life or agriculture. Real cowboys, as I said, never routinely rode bulls.
Still there.
They didn't wrestle steers.
16. I need some help. Bernie's out here. Come on.
They didn't ride bareback. They didn't practice calf roping as a timed event.
Barbed wire is down to him, and this guy can be mighty quick on the ground.
They certainly didn't put flank straps on the animals.
First jump out. Easy, boys.
People would not stand for this if it were done to a pet dog or cat, so what is the difference? There's a wonderful line from the Dalai Lama. It says, our primary purpose in life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least do them no harm.
When I was in high school, I had this quotation. I went to Star the Sea Academy over here. And I remember under my high school picture, I wrote this quotation, and I think I still believe it today. The capacity to care is the thing which gives life its deepest significance. So I think Eric is really sort of the embodiment of, you know, just caring. He's you know, he just never stops. He's sort of relentless in a good way. You know, it's kind of like other people get burnt out, you know, but he just gets back into the ring and keeps on fighting, keeps on saying, hey, you know, let's boycott this rodeo, write to these people on this commission and tell them to ban mutton busting or calf roping or whatever. And he talks to people, and that's what it's all about. There's very few leaders in this world, there's more followers, so you follow him because he's such a leader.
I've been doing rodeo work since the mid-1980s, and I got my major impetus to do it here at the Royal Ranch Rodeo in Hayward.
Here we go. cowboy. Let's make him feel at home over with that old half sucked up the hind legs. Woo!
The Hayward Area Police Officers Association was putting on a benefit rodeo for Special Olympics here at the Row Ranch Rodeo Grounds. I came, a horse broke her leg in the chute and was down in the arena, couldn't get up. The rodeo/cops used an electric prod on her and kicked her for a couple minutes to get her on 3 legs. She finally was able to hobble out of the arena on 3. No veterinarian was present. They shot her to death with a cop's gun. That's not the worst thing that happened. They were doing breakaway roping. With these 3 calves, 3 in a row ran into the arena fence. They had no signage on the fence. The calves could not see where they were going, and bam, and went down. I thought their necks had been broken. After that, my favorite event of the day probably was one called steer dressing. 2, maybe 3 Hayward police officers wrestle a steer to the ground and try to put women's lace panties on the hind legs. And the steer is bawling, they're all rolling around in the dirt, and the announcer, I will never forget this, soundbox right there, bed grammar and all, says, "Take them down, boys, spread them legs, get them panties down." So I met with a couple of folks from Hayward Friends of Animals and the SPCA here in Oakland. We met with the Row Ranch and the police officers, and they promised us to have padding on the fence the next year and to have a veterinarian present. That was 1986, I guess. I went to the rodeo again, no signage on the fence. The first calf out of the chute, again in the calf roping, ran headlong into the fence, went down, suffered a broken palate and nose. No vet was present. We called a vet who got here about 3 hours later, and she told us that the calf had broken his nose so badly he could touch his forehead with the broken tip of the nose. So that's when the doo-doo hit the fan. We went to board again with the cops. I said, "Don't you find it ironic that peace officers are crippling animals to help cripple children? What the hell is the matter with you people?" So they banned the police rodeo forever. It is gone. Thank you, Jesus. Isn't that ironic and horrible that Police Officers Association could be doing this, harming animals to help children? And what message did the kids get about that too? What a horrible message to send to children about what it's okay to do with animals.
Got it. I need some help to make the time for Eagle High. Now, time doesn't start till he gets back in the saddle and moves forward.
People think of rodeo as some old tradition, old cowboy tradition, and it really isn't. It has nothing to do with cowboys traditionally. Cowboys don't ride bucking broncos. They don't rope bulls so that they bring them down and tie them up. Rodeos are a macho form of entertainment, and the animals are often badly injured. There are broken backs, there are dislocated limbs, there are broken limbs, there are animals who run straight into walls. It's very violent treatment of these animals, and these animals aren't habituated to this kind of treatment, hopefully. They are basically on their way to the slaughterhouse, bulls and cattle and horses, and this is a stop that they make.
Horn straight across. Nice.
The chute opens, they run out, they're terrified, and then they are subjected to absolutely violent abuse. It's a horrible, horrible thing to do to animals. Eric is a lone wolf, so to speak. He works by himself, he brings people in to form coalitions, but really it's Eric's work. And when he goes up to Sacramento, when he writes letters to the editor, it's all Eric. He's extraordinary in that way, and he has put his heart and soul into trying to stop this brutal, brutal entertainment.
I was at the California Rodeo in Salinas, 1995. I saw 5 animals killed in one weekend. I talked to the veterinarian. One was a calf with a broken back who was trucked off to slaughter, suffering in agony and terrified. Took 2 days. I talked to the vet. I said, "Doc, did he get any painkillers?" He responded, "No, that would ruin the meat for human consumption." I said, "Damn you," I said, "your license should have been revoked for malpractice. You let that baby animal agonize for 2 days to save $125 when your damn rodeo was bringing in, at the time, $13 million to Salinas every year. Shame on you and shame on rodeo."
What I like about Eric and what makes him so important is he's been around a long time and he sticks to it. He sticks to it, and many times he's willing to change. He's willing to try something else and adapt. Well, I found out that there are maybe others in the animal rights groups and activist groups. Some of them have all kinds of degrees, or they have a lot of money behind them, or some kind of prestige and stuff, but they're narrow focused and they don't want to go outside their realm. And at least Eric is willing to try. And he and I batted heads many times on things. Sometimes he agreed, sometimes he didn't. But it was all to the point of trying to help, get whatever he wanted passed or taken care of.
And we really need to put politicians in office who care about animals to make the changes that we need. I read somewhere that the single biggest lobby in this country is comprised of people who care about animals. But caring by itself ain't enough. You have to get active. You have to show up. You have to write letters. You have to go to hearings. You have to protest. You have to get legislation introduced every year in Sacramento. There's plenty to be done, and one person really can make a difference. This perseverance is half the battle. Just stick to it. My great-grandma used to say, if you stick with something long enough, there will be a payoff.
I need some help. Ernie's out here. Come on. Come on, everybody. He will not quit.
The 98th Row Ranch Rodeo in Castro Valley this weekend. The controversy over treatment of animals is heating up. The main figures, men who have been butting heads for decades, and they view this in very different ways. Russ Fields is an East Bay rancher who has run the rodeo for more than 30 years.
I raise cattle, livestock. That's what I do. And, you think I'm going to hurt my investment, my livelihood? There's no way.
Eric Mills is an Oakland activist who's led the charge against the rodeo since the 80s.
If we did to our dog what we do to a baby calf at the rodeo, people would burn the arena to the ground right now.
Mills was satisfied with the rodeo's animal welfare policies until Fields brought back 2 events in recent years. In wild cow milking, a lactating cow is chased down and roped by one cowboy, while another tries to capture some milk in a beer bottle to present to the judges.
The video they showed of a cow, she went right back there and went to her calf, started nursing, and that. She just it was no big deal to them.
The event pictured here is called Wild Cow Milking Contest. It is not a sanctioned event, yet it's found at many rodeos throughout the country. 2 cowboys, one on the ground is called the mugger, fittingly, down horseback, lassos this poor cow, and then they try to bring her to a standstill and put a couple drops of milk into a Coke bottle and run back to the finish line. Well, folks need to be aware that these are not dairy cattle, they are beef cattle, and completely unused to being handled at all, much less this roughly. One of these poor cows jumped the fence at the Row Rodeo in 2014, landed on her head, broke her neck, and suffered a prolapsed eyeball, had to be euthanized, and left an orphan calf. Another of these cows broke a leg at the Livermore Rodeo in 2004 and had to be euthanized. Again, this event has nothing to do with rodeo. The cows are really stressed out. They're separated from their still nursing babies who are stressed out also. And then a lot of them end up orphaned just for fun. And it should not be allowed. The issue is before the Alameda County Board of Supervisors again, hopefully this fall, and they will ban this event forever.
They got 30 seconds yet to go.
tenacity on the issue of rodeos is extraordinary. He does it because he deeply believes that these animals are hurting and he wants to help them. He wants this to stop. And the odds have been against him every step of the way. And I think the fact that he has persisted is in and of itself an achievement.
Rodeo animals are all prey animals. The cattle, the sheep, the horses, the steers. And when they're roped and ridden and chased and dragged and wrestled, they think they're going to die. And yet we have the president of the Rodeo Association from the Row Ranch, Russ Fields. We were on TV a couple of years ago, and the announcer asked Mr. Fields, "Do you think animals feel fear?" And Russ, my buddy, says, "Feel fear?" He says, "Nah, they're an animal." Lord, I said, thank you, Jesus. That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
Do you deny that the animals feel fear?
No, I don't think they feel fear. They're
Really?
an animal. Yeah, no.
All of these animals in the rodeo are prey animals. As such, they fear for their very lives. When they're ridden and roped and chased and wrestled and thrown to the ground, they think they're going to die.
The men also have very different views of mutton busting, in which kids hang on to sheep as they leave the gates.
Mutton busting is a way of getting inner city kids and kids that are not ranch raised out here to participate if they want to.
Mills says the sheep often can't support the weight of the kids and wind up injured.
It's teaching kids that cruelty and this mistreatment is okay. It's not.
Mills and his fellow activists failed to get the events banned at a meeting in March of the Hayward Area Recreation and Park District Board. The lone dissenting vote came from Manan Jameson, who wrote in an editorial this week, "The animal advocates are right. The rodeo animal welfare policy is sorely outdated." The activists are pushing on with billboards, an online petition with 108,000 supporters, and the protest tomorrow.
That's half ladies. I need a little help for the ladies.
Human suffering, animal suffering, I think they're inseparable. We have a long history of that, some of it intentional, some not. But the animals don't have a choice in the matter, and I think they obviously do suffer. Descartes said for years that animals don't suffer. They're like machines. It's mechanical. It's instinct. Well, pardon the expression, but that's all BS. Of course they suffer. We all suffer, and humans are animals too. We should keep in mind, and this should be sobering, we're the most destructive animal on the planet, and the only self-destructive one that I know. The only one. That should give us pause right there.
He's so tenacious about educating people, young people, seniors, about why rodeo is cruel. And I have somebody here agreeing with me.
One thing about Eric is he's extremely sarcastic. You know, he really stirs the pot, let's say, and he's going to tell a joke. He's going to be funny. He's got a lot of funny stories. He tells a story when he was 10 years old. He was taken out by a professor to go actually collect some birds for a museum, which means shoot the birds. And they were endangered species. There was only like 3 of them.
I don't like the idea of shooting birds just for that, but I went, we found the birds, and Dr. Lovell, bless his heart, took a shot and missed completely, shot himself in the foot. I cracked up. And he was hobbling around and saying ugly words. I said, it serves you right. It says, those birds are endangered, and you're going to collect one from a museum. All 3 birds survived, and Dr. Lovell lived to tell the story another day. I never let him forget that either. Back in 1992, I went to my first charreada. I'd never been to a charreada before, the Mexican rodeo. They have a standard event called horse tripping, where they have 2 Arabian fillies, which are on the way to the slaughterhouse. You can see wounds old and new, and they use them repeatedly. They run them full speed around the arena. And then a cowboy, called a charro, either on horseback or on foot, would lasso the running horse by the front legs and bring her down. They were doing somersaults, slamming into the wall, screaming. Have you ever heard a horse scream? It's quite extraordinary. And I talked to one of the charros afterwards. I said, would you do this to the horse that you're riding on? And his horse was in great shape. He said, oh no, but these horses, they're going to slaughter. Nice people doing god-awful things to animals. Well, as a result of that, I went to Sacramento, got a bill introduced by Assemblyman Joe Baca. He's Assemblyman from Bakersfield, California, Latino. I thought it'd be important to have a Mexican-American introduce the bill because there'd be lots of charges of racism, and there were regardless. Well, the bill failed the first year, but it passed the second year almost unanimously. And now 12 other states have adopted the same law. So one person can make a difference. That's probably one of the best victories I've ever had. I really felt good about that. And I met a lot of really nice Mexican cowboys since, too, who are very nice people, too, who are upset with me, but nice people nonetheless, and they don't do horse tripping anymore in those 12 states.
Eric reached out to Cesar Chavez, which was, I think, a brave and smart thing to do. Quite brilliant, actually. Cesar Chavez was the leader of the farm worker movement, and animal rights activists and farm workers have a lot in common, especially those farm workers who are in slaughterhouses and factory farms and who are treated so terribly by the people who own those places. Eric, understanding that, reached out to Cesar, and I know he was very proud of the interaction that they had, and I envy that.
I wrote to Cesar Chavez, whom I marched with a couple of times, United Farm Workers, and asked for a letter of support for what I was trying to do. And he wrote me a letter in 1990, which is one of my most treasured possessions, that all these things are interconnected. Violence, racism, cruelty to animals, all cut from the same fabric of violence. We're going to the San Francisco Chinatown live animal food markets, where I've not been for 2 years. But that was the impetus back in the mid-90s of a lawsuit, a cruelty lawsuit that we brought and lost, unfortunately, because of the conditions that the animals are kept in. I've seen dead animals in the water, animals with missing body parts. It's brutal stuff. It's the stuff of nightmares, and it sticks with me. I don't know how many times over the years I've had people say, don't show me that, it's too terrible, I can't look at it. I said, look, if you don't bear witness and acknowledge that this exists, nothing ever changes. We all have a moral obligation to witness what's going on and speak up and make things right. I think we have a moral responsibility to treat these animals as humanely as possible. We need to do better by the critters because it puts everybody at risk. The environment, the people who eat these animals, and the animals themselves. But, I mean, if we were doing this to dogs and cats, people would be out in arms.
I remember back to when Eric was trying to organize some legislation to ban live animal markets. And that was a very ticklish thing to do because members of the Asian community assumed it was a racist effort. Those of us who were organizing it were thinking solely of the animals. We weren't thinking of how the Asian community would receive this. And that's something that one has to be really careful about in campaigns, that you don't alienate people who might be natural allies. And in that instance, it being perceived as anti-Asian killed the effort.
My family is from China and Taiwan. Some of my family members actually moved into Chinatown and other parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. So I grew up eating animals and have a lot of memories of buying live animals from grocery stores where there were dozens of animals in tanks and stacked on top of each other. And it made me really sad as a child. I remember when we took them home, like in plastic bags, and boiled them alive, they would be trying to jump out of the pot on our stove. And to this day, I can still hear that clanging, like that persistent, like clanging until they, overheated and died. And it bothered not just me, but some of my other family members, including my Buddhist grandmother. And we were just wondering, like, why are we doing this, even though it is a part of our tradition?
I'm a big fan of cultural diversity. That's why I moved to this area back in the 60s to begin with. But just because something is a cultural tradition is no justification for animal cruelty. I don't care what the culture is. I got a great quote from Cesar Chavez back in 1990 in support of my rodeo work, saying all these things are interrelated. Racism, cruelty to animals, rodeos, dog fights, bull fights are all interrelated. They have come from the same fabric of violence. So violence to animals and violence to each other, which seems to be endemic and epidemic in the species. We like killing things.
Thing about being in the animal rights movement is that if you care so deeply about these issues, if you care so deeply, they also affect you deeply. Because there's other people, they just say, well, it's going on all over the world, there's nothing I can do. Well, that's not true. I think we as moral agents, sure, we can't change the whole world, there's all kinds of injustices, but that does not excuse us from doing something, anything, to help in our own way.
Killing is no business! Their bodies, their flesh, their lives, their freedom.
We need some serious work as human beings. Until we get our own act together, the animals are going to continue to pay the price. And it's not right at all. For me, it has to do with justice and fair play, common sense, concern for others, sense of caring. It's real easy, really, on some levels. I think we have a moral responsibility to treat these animals as humanely as possible.
I think that most groups of people exploit animals in some way, and I believe that approaching these issues with cultural humility is key. Real conversations about shared values help us understand that none of our ancestors were eating animals at this scale and mistreating animals in this way. And this whole system has consequences, not just for the animals, but for people and the planet as well.
One day, Eric and Virginia and I, who were the three main people that were behind the live animal market, we went down to the Chinatown markets, and Eric made up this chart, and he had like all the addresses and all the names of the markets, and he had a checklist of, is there water, is there food, are they overcrowded, are they whatever. He just, goes right into the markets. We went in and, they didn't want us to take any pictures. So we thought, well, we'll just get a plastic bag and maybe pretend that we're shopping there. We had some wonderful Asian girls that were on board too. One of them went in the markets with us. She actually picked up a turtle that was dead. So they're selling adulterated meat, which is totally illegal if you want to talk about this from only a health aspect.
Live animal markets are very neglectful, more than violent, neglectful towards the animals who are there. It's a terrible experience for the crustaceans, for the lobsters, for the turtles, for the birds. You know, when you look at it solely from the perspective of the animal's welfare, it's very easy to condemn it. When it becomes politicized, then you're facing, you no longer can be talking about the ethics, the decency, because you're not heard.
It's mostly politics, I think. Animal Welfare Commission voted to close the markets down. The Board of Supervisors refused to consider the issue for political reasons, understandably. And I met with, I think, 9 or 10 of the supervisors, and they all seemed supportive, but politically they just could not do it or would not do it. And the animals pay the price. It's not right. It's an ethical question. It's a moral question. It's a health question, a cruelty question. And the answers are quite obvious to me, I think, and many feel as I do. But here we are. It's going to take politics and lawsuits and public disapproval. And there's a lot of it out there. Not enough yet, but as I say, it's been 25 years and I ain't no spring chicken anymore myself. I'd like to see some real success before I keel over.
3 things that would be basically a change. Number 1 would be to push the department and get an answer why they don't enforce California Code of Regulations, Title 14, Section 236, which basically states that all imported live animals, and in this case specifically the frogs and the turtles coming into the markets, have a right to be inspected by the department. And if they're found diseased, they have to be killed or shipped out. And this doesn't cost the department anything. The inspector has to be paid for, they have to provide the place, they pay for all the costs and everything. That's the first thing. The second thing is, because of the chytrid and all the problems that these frogs are causing now, I would say he needs to get together, they need to get together, they need to go up to the Capitol prior to the next frog jumping contest, because the Capitol in Sacramento has a 2 weeks, something that's 2 weeks ahead of the Calaveras frog jumping contest, the big one. And they do their own thing. That would be the perfect time to get up there. You've got all the presses up there, you've got all the senators and the assembly people, and they all got their frogs. Walk up to them, have your signs, have your handouts, have your pictures, have your information, have your facts. Walk up, and when they're standing there talking to the news people, say, hey, what about, this frog you've got can pass the chytrid on and kill our native species and blah, blah. That's a perfect opportunity. The third thing I would do is get active. I would actually get some signs, get some pictures, and go down and walk around Chinatown and protest, get on the public streets and stay within the boundaries of the law, but let the tourists know, because if you affect the tourist trade and you get them back and forth, that can really hurt them, and that's going to make things change. I've always said, you're not going to change politicians' minds or the people in power unless you do one of 2 things. You either get them to change because it helps them, or you get them to change because it hurts them. And those are the 3 things I would advise him to do.
I just want to reiterate that I believe that the way that we are treating animals in this country has disastrous impacts for not just those animals, but for people and the planet as well. And I do not believe that this is a singular cultural issue, that this is something that is happening across the United States and even globally.
You ought to praise us instead of fight us. Yes, you can. I know you have. I've been with you every 35 years step.
You know the Board of Supervisors. Be there.
We don't know that yet.
I'm pretty sure.
I know you've been. You want to ban rodeo. That's your job. You want to do that, don't you?
I do.
You got to tell all these kids that they might want to try to hang you from that pole right there. Yeah. Okay, I'm running bulls and horses out. Okay.
The bulls through. Pick good care of them. Be safe.
Okay, guys, I got to have you back up.
Hold up.
Thank you.